Hello everyone, it's Shannon here, and today I'm making a few cards using Waffle Flower's newest release products. I'm using this stamp set here. It's called Warm Hands. It's a layering stamp set that creates two beautiful Swedish mittens. It's very clearly organized and outlined, so it's really easy to use. There's also a matching die, so this is the Warm Hand matching dies, which comes with two wonderful sentiments, Stay Warm and Burr. And then finally I'll be using this new layering stamp set. It's called Layering Woodgrain. If you liked Waffle Flower's Layering Marble, you're going to love this new stamp set as well. I'm going to pull off a stamp from the Layering Marble. It doesn't really matter which layer you start with, but I'm starting with the layer that's more solid. I'm going to position it here using some creative corners, so my A2 panel of white cardstock is just a little bit away from the edge there, so I can stamp the entire surface of the panel. I'm using my MISTI because I really like to use some kind of stamp positioning tool when I'm using layering stamp sets. I'm going to ink up this first layer of the Layering Woodgrain stamp set with a Distress Oxide. This is called Antique Linen. I'm just going to ink this up like you normally would. It is a more solid stamp, so I'm making sure I get it fully covered. And then I will stamp this. And then I'm going to ink this, clean this off, and then I'll ink this same stamp again with another Distress Oxide. So I'm going to clean this up real quick. So now I'm going to use another Distress Oxide. It's called FRAYED BURLAP, but I'm not going to just apply the ink like I normally would. I'm going to swipe the ink across the stamp. This is going to create streaks on the surface of the stamp, and it'll really enhance this wood grain look. So holding up the camera here, you can kind of see the streaks just by dragging my ink pad over the surface of the stamp. So it's very, very simple to do. And it will create like streaks on the surface. Really looks perfect with this wood grain stamp set. Really like this technique with this stamp set. So that's the first layer. Now I'm going to mount the second layer of this wood grain stamp set on my MISTI. They do line up, so I'm going to kind of look through the second layer here and line it up with the negative spaces of the first layer. Sorry, my head got in the way. Kind of have to lean over to really make sure it's in the right spot. And then pick it up here with my MISTI. I'm going to now use another Distress Oxide color. This one is Fossilized Amber. And again, I'm going to ink this up just like I normally would. And then stamp this as well. And after I stamp this, I will be doing another Distress Oxide, one more, to complete this entire look. I'm going to use Vintage Photo, and just like I did with the FRAYED Burlap, I'm going to swipe it across. But first I'm going to clean my stamp real quick here after I stamp it one more time, just to make sure I got as much of that ink off of that stamp as I can. So clean it off real quick. Now I'm moving on to the Vintage Photo. And I'm going to swipe it across just like I did earlier. This one I'm going to use a little bit more ink, so I'm pouncing it a little bit first. A couple of times I pounced it and then swiped it just so I could get a little bit more ink out of the ink pad and onto the stamp. But it still, because I swiped it across the surface, it still has that streaky look. And I'm just doing, again, stamping it one more time just to make it a little bit darker. But it still has streaks on the surface. And I'll hold it up here to the camera so you can kind of see that beautiful wood grain. Really cool, very simple to do, but has a really great look. Really like this new stamp set. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of speed it up here in the process, and I'm going to repeat the exact same things that I did, that I just showed you, till I completely cover this panel with this wood grain. So I'll meet you back when it's done. Okay, so I'm all done now with the stamping for this layering wood grain background. And I'll hold it up here to the camera so you can really see how beautiful it turned out. Really cool. It's like making your own wood grain pattern paper. Awesome. Okay, so now I'm going to take the warm hand stamp set, and I pulled off the first layer of the mittens, and I'm going to ink them up with a Waffle Flower dye ink. This is called My Pleasure. It's a beautiful kind of corally red. Really love this color. I'm going to stamp it, and because this is more of a solid stamp, I will be inking this up and stamping this a couple times just to make sure I get complete coverage and I get a really nice dark and crisp image. So one more time here. And then this first layer of the mittens is done. There are 3 layers in total. So I'm going to now pull off the second layer of both the right and left mitten. And again, these are clearly labeled and organized on the acetate that the stamp comes with. So it's very, very easy to figure out how to, or to figure out which stamp goes to which mitten. So very, very easy. Okay, so I've got those positioned. I'm now going to ink this second layer of the mittens with a different color. This is another Waffle Flower dye ink. It's called Tickled Pink. It's a warm pink color, really pretty. Looks beautiful with the My Pleasure. And again, I'm going to ink it up a couple times just to make it a little bit darker and more vivid. And now I'm moving on to the final layer of these mittens. So just going to line it up here in the negative space. And these mittens are so beautiful, you could stop with the second layer. I think honestly you could stop after you stamp the first layer. But once you stamp all 3 layers together, it really adds a lot of detail, especially when you use different ink colors. Really love this set. Okay, this is, the final color I'm using is a Waffle Flower dye ink called New Fish in Pond. A nice aqua color. And it adds the final touch to these mittens. I just love the folk art look of these mittens. I think it's perfect for Christmas or even just winter cards. They're so, so cute. Okay, so now I've got these completely stamped. I'm going to use the matching dies to die cut them out. So you can see them here. And there's a little bit, the stamp is intentionally leaves some areas white, and I love that because it's almost like incorporating a 4th color without actually having to stamp it. So really, really clever design on these mittens. Okay, I also die cut some craft foam with the matching dies, and I'm now going to adhere the mittens on top of the craft foam. This is just going to add some dimension to my card. And I'm using some Tombow mono liquid adhesive to adhere these two together. Very simple to do. And you could definitely use foam tape if you wanted to instead. Okay, so I've got my wood grain here, and now I need to stamp my sentiment. So I'm going to use my MISTI again just to make sure I don't mess up the sentiment. I'm kind of positioning, I'm using the mittens here to kind of help me figure out where I'm going to put that sentiment. So I'm going to put it in the kind of the lower left corner here. And once I get it nice and straight, I'm going to take those mittens out of the way, and then I am going to stamp that sentiment. And the sentiment again is from the warm hand stamp set. So I put down some anti-static powder because I am going to heat emboss this. So I'm inking it up with Versamark ink. And I always like to do it twice just to make sure I get it completely covered and enough ink on the surface. And I'm just using some white embossing powder, pouring it on top, and then heat setting it with my heat gun. And there's my sentiment. It says, warm winter wishes. Super cute. So I have a card base made from craft paper. It's a top folding A2 card base. I'm now going to glue that wood grain panel onto the surface, and I'm going to use the Tombow mono liquid adhesive again. And just hold it down a little bit. It had a tiny bit of warping from the heat gun. I didn't quite get my heat gun hot before I started to melt the embossing powder. But the glue will totally take away that little bit of warp. And now I have a little bit of yarn cut. I'm going to add adhesive on the back of one of the mittens, and then sandwich that yarn between the mitten and the front of the card. Just hold it down for a couple seconds just to make sure it's all holding that yarn down. I'm doing the exact same thing with the other mitten, sandwiching a little tail end of that yarn underneath the mitten and holding it in place till the glue kind of sets a tiny bit, so it's really holding it down. Now I'm going to kind of twist and position that yarn how I want it and use a little bit more of that adhesive to kind of hold that yarn in place. So I'm just putting little dots of adhesive on the yarn and then kind of pressing it down to the surface of the panel to kind of hold everything in place. Nice little detail with this yarn, really simple to do, but adds a little texture and some more three-dimensional elements to the card. And that's done. So really cute. I did stamp a couple more here that I'll show you with just using the same color of inks, but just in different combinations. And that's one other really fun thing you can do with this warm hand stamp set. You can really play with ink colors. I love doing that. And you can really make some beautiful grouping of cards. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. And I thank you so much for spending some time with me. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day.